X4 is a game that I've wanted to play and review for this channel ever since its release back in 2018. Unfortunately, I hesitated to buy it due to the messy launch and lack of overall content compared to X3. 6 years and 5 DLCs later, I was given a code by Egosoft for the Cradle of Humanity edition. This not only includes the base game, but also includes the 5 DLCs known as Split Vendetta, Cradle Humanity, Tides of Avarice, Kingdom End, and Timelines. That's a crap ton to review in one video, but I'll try my best to highlight the overall experience. Going over every single feature will just take far too much time in my opinion and will honestly get very tedious. Also, while I do appreciate the free code from Egosoft, it will not deter me from a fair and honest review. Sounds good? Let's begin. Actually, before we begin, I wanted to give you a forewarning on some of this footage here. Most of it looks like I'm piloting around like a drunk madman for how much rotating that I'm doing. Turns out, the Z-axis for my Thrustmaster 1600 was just going bad. Thankfully, I replaced it with a VKB Gladiator NXT Evo and was finally able to pilot as expected. Sorry for the somewhat long preamble, but we can finally begin. So when you look at the main menu, there are a crap ton of options for you to pick. You can hop into one of the many tutorials, play the timeline campaign, or jump into the universe from one of several starting points. I won't lie, it can feel a bit overwhelming looking at all these options, but I'm glad to have these starting points to give different ways of playing X4. This is ultimately a space sandbox, so the choice is ultimately yours. Since I wanted to play as one of the more unique alien races, I chose the Queen's Herald scenario, which puts me in the role of a Boron attempting to re-establish relationships with other species. Also start out with a Thresher and 200,000 credits to help me in whatever direction I want to end up going in. My character's name is also FOMO Fee, meaning he has a constant suffering fear of missing out. Similar to prior X games, I figured that I would be starting out in my ship somewhere in space, but to my surprise, I actually began in the main headquarters of the Boron race. Since I'm not really sure what to do at the moment, I decided to talk to the people right next to me. It's pretty interesting walking around the various stations that you find in the universe, although they all usually fit one particular theme or another. It all becomes a bit samey after some time. As we are talking, we then take the elevator to hear the Queen's Herald. We get a cutscene which isn't a common sight in the X series. Our mission here is to rebuild relations with the other major players in the universe. Afterwards, I get my first task to deliver a certain amount of food to Heretic's End to begin the quest. I actually enjoyed this cutscene as it quickly establishes the Boron as a peace-loving faction. And now it is time to finally leave and head into space, which is what you'll be doing for the most part. I will say I really should have looked into the tutorial to get used to the controls. I also should have loaded the correct control profile before beginning, but I was able to resolve that pretty quickly. There's quite a few profiles for Flight 6 supported, so I was happy to see that. There are many ways to make money, but one is from completing various missions. These can be randomly generated ones or even some handcrafted ones that are pretty fun to go through. One in particular involved the creation of a highway in the Sanctuary of Darkness. It was fun as it featured a ton of action defending the construction site from the CAC invaders. Completing this quest not only gives you a cash reward, but it also completes the construction of the highway. Highways are a new part in X4. Basically, any small or medium ship can ride these highways in order to get a huge boost of speed. It's a great way to jump from one sector to another and cut down on the tedium. The implementation of these highways seemed to have a bit of a mixed reception within the community, but I personally found them to be a welcome addition. So much time in X4 is spent on traveling, so anything that can help speed it up is a win for me. And if you are anything like me, combat is going to be what you'll end up doing a lot if you decide to go down that route. While you can technically attack anything that you see, my playstyle as a Boron made it so I only attacked factions that were already hostile to me. For neutral factions, I focused on completing missions with them to boost my relationship status. Using a flight stick, the combat is pretty damn fun. There's a boatload of various ships and weapon combinations to try out. The Boron have their own unique weapons that can only be exclusively used on their ships, so I was doing that for a majority of my early playthrough before I started to experiment with the different races. Boarding is also another aspect of combat to take note of. Large and extra large ships can be boarded. This is done by hiring Marines for your ships and beginning the boarding process. Boarding is divided into 3 stages. The first stage involves destroying certain components on the ship. This can be something like destroying a set number of turrets or destroying the engines. Once the first stage is done, the Marine pods will be launched at the ship, and it then moves on to destroying the hull of the ship to a certain amount. This is when it gets a bit tedious, as you're usually just waiting for your Marines to breach the hull and take over the bridge. Personally, I wish you could get involved with this, considering the fact that you can buy a gun and grenade launcher for personal use. It would be pretty awesome storming a ship in a first-person perspective with your fellow Marines. Not sure if a future DLC is in the works for that, but this can be an aspect I would like to see improved a bit. If I had to say one issue with the combat is the squad AI. The X series was never known for having sophisticated combat AI, but was at least serviceable enough. Instead, your allies need to be instructed constantly in order to be effective. If you have more than 3 allies, it can get a bit chaotic with all these menus that appear. I found it better to have the AI control large capital ships while you use some medium ships. They will handle the large ships using the big guns, while the turrets provide additional support. And from what I can gather, the AI issues can stem from the way personnel management is handled here. In X3, when you captured a ship, you could just have an AI control the ship right then and there. Now you need to hire a captain to pilot the ship. Most potential captains you'll meet fall within the 1 to 2 star range of piloting along with their morale. This makes them pretty low level pilots, along with being easily scared due to their low morale. They'll often bail the first sign of struggle instead of being creative and crafty in dogfights. It also takes a long time to train your staff, as you'll need to purchase seminars to give to your crew. If you want to hire somebody who starts at least 3 stars, good luck, as you will need to pay a ridiculous amount of cash money boy to make that happen. The system here is not a bad idea, but the implementation of it leaves a lot to be desired. Alright, so back on track. I ended up finding a way to Heretic's End and delivered the food to a suspicious profession named Boso Ta. Initially, this feels like a fool's errand, as it has nothing to do with the Queen's Herald. However, he had a proposal where I take full control of the building and help him complete tasks to advance his research. I agreed, and now I technically run the HQ of Heretic's End. Kinda nice surprise and kind of a cool moment as well. Building bases and expanding on them is its own can of worms, but I can briefly talk about the research. From the research screen, you can obtain new items to craft, such as mods for your ship or the ability to teleport. 4 of them involve missions, while the rest of them involve obtaining the correct amount of resources and bringing them to the base. It's a fun addition if you want to go down this route, so I do appreciate its inclusion here. Personally, I was too focused on the story missions and making that cash money boy, but I still see it as a positive addition. As I begin to gain more money, I felt that it was about time to add another ship and really start creating a fleet. At first, I wanted a small but fast ship to help keep up with my main ship and provide additional support. I chose the Paranid's fleet Perseus Vanguard due to its high speed potential and cost-effective weapons. Unfortunately, I was only neutral with the faction, so I did not have the correct authorization to get their higher tier of weapons or fighters. One of my favorite aspects of the ships in this game is the ability to mix and match parts from other races. For example, you can buy an Argon ship and equip it with split engines for some really fast fighters. It's a fun system, although Boron ships are not able to take advantage of this level of modularity. There's also just a crap ton of ships to use and discover, all offering their own unique benefits. Eventually, I decided to make some friends with the various races of the world, and I focused mainly on the Argon Federation for a bit. Once I reached relationship level 10 after completing various missions, I was able to attain a military license and get their higher tier ships. Relationship level 10 also unlocks guild missions to participate in, which are much more difficult and are usually split into multiple objectives. To get their large and extra large capital ships, that will require a relationship level of 20. One thing to note is that early on, it's very easy to increase relationships with a faction. However, it becomes harder the higher your relationship with that faction is. It'll take more for you to reach higher levels, essentially. So I mentioned initially how there are several scenarios for you to take up, but it is also possible to create your own starting conditions as well. You can pick one using points that you've obtained during your playthrough, or going through a freeform mode with no limitations. I appreciate this inclusion as it allows you to get an accelerated start with your own starting conditions. You can also manipulate the universe in terms of selecting certain story beats you want to have active. And to wrap this up, I'll give a comment on the timelines expansion here. As mentioned, there are loosely connected missions that are all presented in several campaigns. Completing these missions will unlock new ships to use in the main game. It's a nice incentive, although it's a bit of a shame that players will need to do this. Most players like me would just rather jump into the sandbox and enjoy the beautiful world that is crafted. And I can't believe I didn't mention the graphics prior. As expected, this is easily the best looking X game to date. The interiors on some of these capital ships are downright gorgeous to look at. The lighting and colors used for each of the sectors really help to give each place their own identity. The same can be said for the music, which suits the atmosphere of exploration in space perfectly. Great stuff all around from a presentation standpoint. Unfortunately, there are still some glitches that I've run into, with many of them falling into the graphical category. There seems to be some sort of memory leak issue, as playing the game for too long results in some odd visual glitches and behavior. It can definitely be immersion breaking, but thankfully I've had zero crashes throughout 90 hours of gameplay. With how much fun X4 is exploring the universe, engaging in dogfights, collecting ships, and whatever else I feel like doing, I can easily recommend this game. With over 90 hours in this title and counting, I don't see myself stopping anytime soon. There are a ton of paths to take, roles to play, and missions to get involved in. My only major gripe is with the friendly AI for how it's somehow worse than X3, and it can also get a bit too cumbersome and chaotic with managing fleets with all the menus, but none of this detract too much from the overall product. Being a peacekeeping Boron was fun, but maybe in a future playthrough I take on the role of a Terran merchant, or maybe a warmongering Talati. The possibilities are many, and I'm looking forward to my continued adventures. Thank you all for watching, and this is Powerhouse, signing off.